Not me but my mom. But it's basically the entire reason I'm staying single. This was about 3ish years ago. I'm a freshman in college. For some backstory, my mom was a PA in neurosurgery and he was an anesthesiologist in his residence, so drugs were a huge no-no. Anyway, he choked her out because she was pretty much done with his bullshit. She had severe tendonitis in her wrists/hands and feet, and she was barely able to walk and eat, and he wouldn't help out around the house. They lived on 2 acres in the countryside with 6 chickens, 3 digs, a pot-bellied pig, and 4 ducks. She managed the entire place and 3 kids all by herself, and he wouldn't lift a finger. He would just come home from clinical rotations and smoke pot, do LSDs, shrooms, or whatever he could get his hands on. Soon his antics became so heavy and frequent that it actually began to affect the animals, mostly the smoke from cigarettes or pot, and the animals would get high and do stupid shit that would get them really sick, and so my mom confronted him about it. Their somewhat civilized raised voice arguments turned into full-blown screaming matches that resulted in busted open window and doors when my mom found out he was smoking pot in excess around me. The problem with that is that I have insanely low blood pressure, like to the point where if you smoke pot near me, I will start to pass out since it lowers overall B/P. He would smoke it on the front porch with the window open while I was playing video games inside, and he smoked to the point where I would faint while playing. My brother told me this, and he knew it was that because I would be playing Dark Souls or some shit and I would just flat out pass out and hit my head on the table in front of me. This would be a nightly occurrence and my mom didn't see it as a problem until I was passed out for 12 hours, which is when my brother told her. I ended up leaving. This will be important later, to live with my grandma, because fainting instead of actually falling asleep was really painful and the screaming matches between my mom and stepdad only got worse. Fast forward a few months, when my mom came down for Christmas, and I kid you not, she looked like someone from Auschwitz. She shaved her head before she came, but some hair grew back. She looked really pale, and she was thin to the point of fitting in my clothes. I'm really short and petite. 5 feet 3 inches and pretty muscle Y, compared to my mother being 5'11", and fucking ripped from the heavy lifting around the home. Her carpal tunnel and tendonitis had gotten better, so she could eat, walk and do stuff, but it clearly hurt. On New Year's, I ended up pouring her a shot of vodka. She usually had one, right when the ball dropped, but this time she immediately swigged it down and took me into the bathroom where she just unloaded. She told me that his antics only got worse and worse, and he ended up snapping at the kids really bad, bringing his friends over and almost lighting the barn on fire with the pig inside. He sold her chickens while he was high. We fucking loved those chickens, and that he'd spend most of his paychecks on drugs. Eventually she rambled on saying that she was just tired of being treated like a slave, tired of fighting, and she just wanted to go back to the way things were while he was in med school. I told her straight up to get a divorce if she wasn't happy and to move back to the country roads of WV, but she told me that the kids should have their dad and they didn't want them to end up like me, emotionally scarred from custody transfers and separation. My dad was a convicted rapist. We don't know if he actually did that to someone who had a meth lab in his basement, was basically a prostitute, would physically and emotionally abuse me, would suck my mom's money dry for drugs, and had 7 diseases all starting with the letter H. Don't worry, I'm clean. My mom knew that my dad was beyond saving, but she truly cared about my stepdad and wanted to rebuild their relationship. Fast forward a few weeks and my had found out that my stepdad was stealing pain medication, local anesthesia, and narcotics from the hospital and getting high off them. She threatened to report him to his residency program, and he began choking her until he broke her hyoid bone. My brother saw this entire thing go down, and he called 911 and my mom was still alive, because it was only a stress fracture and not a green stick fracture that rolled wrapped around the rest of her throat. Immediately after surgery, she filed a restraining order and left to the previous house they still owned. Soon each of them found a lawyer, and my stepdad, with some help from his wealthy family, was planning on taking my 2 younger siblings from my mom. She found out when she was drunk and scrolling through his phone, and that was the last straw before she filed for divorce. Because of his wealthy and pathological lying shitsty of a family, the case looked like my mother's loss. They denied all of her claims, saying that my mom was crazy and bipolar. She is mentally ill, having anxiety and depression, but she is by no means insane. She was just explosive when angry, mostly because her parents were. They also claimed she didn't take her meds, not true, and that she was neglectful to her children, which is why I left, also not true. I left because she and my stepdad were constantly fighting to the point where windows and doors were broken down, and I couldn't take it. And they claimed that she was a lazy jobless slob, also not true. Like I said, she was a neurosurgery PA. They earn a $95k salary. She had to quit her job because they were cutting her hours, and in the state they moved to, PAs couldn't prescribe medication. So basically she could only work in the OR, but they have 12-hour shifts and my mom has 2 kids who need to be taken care of. But what my stepdad neglected to mention was that he did steal those narcotics from the hospital. In fact, he actually denied it. And when he was on the phone with the attorney, he accidentally let it slip out that he met with the narcotics police. Basically he got busted, and her reaction was wow, so she wasn't lying. And that basically unfolded into finding the original documents to ones edited by my stepdad's family, and it became an open and shut case. My mom had full custody and 60% of the money, as well as the antique BMW from the 60s. She was very adamant about that one. But it doesn't stop there, boys. My mom is the kind of person who will put white vinegar in your wine for shits and giggles, so she decided to report his residency. At first they said that they'd look into it, but they ended up not getting back to her. She ends up talking to an advisor, and lo and behold, not 1, not 2, but 5 people actually got kicked out for drugs, and if another one got kicked out, they'd be forced to shut it down. So then my mom decides to get the divorce and restraining order into the mix, and the whole slew of things that came with it, and since it basically violated the Hippocratic Oath and well the law, he wasn't really that trustworthy of a doctor anymore, and they kicked him out in the interest of patients and subsequently shut the entire program down. On top of that, she made sure that it stayed on his permanent record, completely disabling him from ever applying to a new residency program. She then went the extra mile to get the dog to piss in his house while he was on vacation in Vegas, charge his credit card to pay the mortgage until she found a new job in neonatology, get the kids to completely ghost him, and she did a B&E. The door was unlocked, so IDK if it actually was, and took the PS4, Nintendo Switch, the Wi-Fi and some furniture. She also sold his gutsy clothes on eBay. IDK how much she made though. Later on, about a year later, my mom finds out that the family is trying to file a lawsuit and get her sued about $50,000. They take the claims to court, but then my mom busts out the case from way back then, along with some medical documents pertaining to said case, like her carpal tunnel and tendonitis, and she turns up the dial to the maximum amount a doctor, my stepdad's father was a plastic surgeon, can be sued in that particular state. $200,000. The lawsuit goes on for about 6 months, and then my mom one day hits me up and says that she got $200k in her pocket, and she ended up putting that into a bank account and is beginning to help me pay for college, and if she has enough med school. I've always loved medicine, and this whole thing has never changed my view of it. Personally, I'd like to do college by myself, but I'm gonna need help in med school, because by my 2nd year I'll be $100k in debt. My mom is now a happy and single lady, still rocking the short hair, and is extremely successful. She cut off contact with my stepdad, so I don't know how he's doing, and frankly I don't really care. So yeah, TL. Doctor, don't get with drug addicts, especially if they're in the medical field. My mom is a vengeful bitch and I love her, and my brother is a hero. Edit. Okay, so I found out that cannabis actually raises blood pressure. So now I'm actually not sure what the hell he was smoking to make me pass out. This also came from my brother, so I'm also not sure if he was telling the full truth either. I'm just going by what he's saying. He said it would gather in the house, so it obviously wasn't instantaneous, but it's still certainly concerning. Edit 2. I also forgot to mention that at the time, we lived in a super old house that had no account, just a bunch of fans and huge glass doors that opened to the front deck from the living room, where the TV was, which were always open because it was hot as hell inside. I'm not sure why he would them open at that time. It was probably just unintentional, but he did. To the story. Me and my friends sometimes hang out with a guy we will call Mark. Now, Mark is in his 40s, happily married to a woman. They have 2 kids in their teens. I will tell this story as accurately as possible from what Mark told us. As you all know, married life can many times get boring with 9-to-5 jobs, mundane life in a small-time village. Kids are growing up, so you don't have to look after them 24/7 anymore. So you do what you can to make life interesting. You get a dog, start some hobbies etc etc. Or so at least Mark thought. He also thought that his happy little life would last forever. Wrong. Mark found out through the grapevine that, while he was playing sports, being at work, trying to break the boring life they were having, his wife, let's call her Mandy, was attending to some hobbies of her own. Hobbies that included getting sweaty and real passionate with another man from a few towns over. At first the rumors didn't bother him, they were rumors after all. But something in Mandy's behavior started to change. No more funny time with Mark, she started to get distant, no more talking, just yelling, being annoyed etc etc. It went on for a few months. This struck Mark as off, and one time, after we were done playing soccer, he asked us what to do. We came up with several advice, like confronting her, but Mark didn't want to ruin his marriage over some mood swings and a rumor. So he did what every sane man would do, /s. He set up cameras all through the house. And I'm talking high quality stuff here. He had cameras in the bathroom, living room, their bedroom, basically everywhere but the room of his children. He updated us on his new hobby and his setup, and things cooled off for a few weeks. After a few weeks after soccer time we went out for a few beers. Mark wasn't quite himself, so we inquired what was wrong. He told us that he, after several nights of reviving tape, found out that Mandy indeed was cheating on him. He was furious. They were married 20+ years. They were high school sweethearts with 2 boys and she betrayed him. Now comes the revenge part. He didn't confront her right ahead. Mark formulated a plan. Living only a few towns over, he had no problem getting the guy's phone number. Now you all know those pesky advertising companies who call you to get you to buy products, right? Mark pretended to be one and called the guy with the pretense he was selling him some body cleansing pills and other shit. He knew the guy was overweight, and being quite a smooth talker, he didn't have much problem getting him hooked. He got the guy's first and last name, which he already knew, his address, SSN, job address and some other stuff that doesn't really matter to the story. He told the guy he was in a ballot for different prizes from the company he was working for, and he would stay in touch in case the guy won anything. After that, came part 2. While Mandy was at work on a Friday, he packed all the stuff she owned, clothes, jewelry, collectibles and other stuff into their family car. They have a VW Touran, so everything she had easily fit in. When Mandy came home from work he told her they were going on a trip. At first she was against it, but again the smooth talking convinced her to roll over pretty quick, and she got in the van with him. Before that he took the boys to one of our friends' house. They weren't 18 yet and he is a responsible father, and off they went. Where did they go, you ask? Remember how he called the guy Mandy was cheating with? I think you know the answer. Sadly, or very hilariously, Mandy had no clue. He took her, all of her belongings, to the guy's address and called him on the way, telling him to come outside. He said he won the first prize and he was on his way to give it to him personally. Mandy still had no clue. She thought he was just pranking one of his friends. I believe you realized by now that she isn't the brightest one in this world. Imagine her and Guy's face when he rolled into the parking spot of Guy's house. He stepped out of the car, shook the guy's hand and told him, "Here is your prize, sir. I believe you know what it is." Took one last look at Mandy's white face and walked off. He got custody of both kids since he was better off than her. Also told the judge she was cheating and that's why he was divorcing her. This all happened last year and as far as we know, the guy was an A-grade arsehole and she left him soon after that, after a few beatings and some trips to the police station. Mark got over her after some time and a lot of alcohol, but he and his boys are doing great. They were both big enough to realize their mom was at fault and still barely talk to her when they go to visit. She tried to return into Mark's life on a few occasions, but he did the smart thing, told her to fuck right off. He told us this story after we went out for a few beers after soccer again. I was laughing so hard imagining the whole thing. I had to go to the bathroom, otherwise I would have peed myself. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as we did. TL. Doctor, wife cheats on husband. He finds a creative way to get rid of her. Edit. It's not a SSN. We are not from USA. Since many people got hung up on it, it's a tax number and I assume he asked for it to sound more believable. Edit 2. Fixed some spelling errors. A lot of people are reading out into every detail how I presented Mark's story. This all happened to me a few years ago. I told a friend the story of my divorce and I was told to share. Started a few years ago. I thought we were happy. We were your usual suburban professional couple. Financially secure, healthy, good sex life. 2 kids. 14F and 9 meters at the time. I thought we had a healthy social life. We were going through one of your typical married couple rough patches. Both of us were working long hours, not spending enough time together. We were going through some developmental problems with my son and tensions in the house were running a little high. I noticed that she was spending a lot more time on her phone texting with her girlfriends. I didn't think much of it. I started making a much more concerted effort to get out of work when I could, help around the house, and be more emotionally available. But over the course of a few weeks the gulf just kept getting wider. I ended up accidentally finding some messages when I charged up an old iPad for my son to use. Her FB Messenger was still logged in and there were a lot of highly questionable messages with a guy from her hometown, who I will call Jim Bob Cooter or JBC for short. The messages weren't completely inappropriate, but I could tell there were quite a few missing, based on the times and context of the messages. I made a mental note to keep an eye on this, and went about trying to fix things up. The next day, after I took the day off to knock out some projects that I thought would make her happy, and left her some sweet notes reminding her how much I appreciated her, she was once again in the corner of the living room texting her girlfriends. I took the boy's iPad to the office, opened up FB Messenger, and watched in real time as my wife tore me down. Her and JBC were making fun of me. All of my flaws, insecurities, and secrets I entrusted to my partner were now fodder for her and JBC. Not only that, but while there wasn't outright sexting, there was a sexual undertone to the whole conversation, especially when she was bashing my performance in the sack. I managed to take some screenshots, but missed a good bit of the messages, because as the conversation was unfolding she was deleting them. I wasn't emotionally capable of confronting her. I stayed in the office until she was asleep and had a couple drinks. I took off the next day and spent some time soul searching, drinking, and trying to figure out what to do. The wife came home and wanted to know what was wrong, and I just coped out and told her I had a bad day. A couple minutes later I was watching the iPad as a train wreck kept unfolding. So began a couple solid weeks of taking screenshots, drinking and detaching myself from the relationship. I knew there was no going back from this. The messages were now overtly sexual with my wife completely into it, and JBC was sprinkling in I love yous. I consulted a lawyer and got my options and started moving forward. Here's where everything got absolutely surreal. Watching the messages I found out JBC was coming to town to spend a weekend of quality time with my wife in a pretty nice hotel. I was missing a good bit of the info. They must have had a phone conversation about it at some point, but I was able to infer enough to get the when and where. Sure as shit the next day the wife is buttering me up and wanting to take a spa weekend with the girls to relax, and when she gets back we can really focus on our marriage. I go with it all the way. It's the greatest idea she's ever had, and I'll do anything to get us back on track. I get with the lawyer and have him draft a strong separation agreement stating that she would move out, she would get weekend visitation, no child support in the interim until the divorce is final. Then I sit through the most agonizing 2 weeks of my life. After all this most of my feelings for her are completely gone, and I'm just seething with anger like I've never felt before. D-Day arrives. I take the day off work. I withdraw half of any money in any accounts we are joint on, leave her half alone. I had already redirected my paycheck to a new bank. I close our money market account and get a cashier's check for her half and deposit my half in my new account. I stop at Office Maximum and print out about 75 pages of FB Messenger screenshots, and I kill time because I don't want to be at home. She texts me that she's taking off and that she loves me. I tell her to have fun. I show up to the hotel at about 8:30 and call the wife's phone from the lobby. It goes straight to VM. They are probably already at it, whatever. I walk up to the front desk and ask if I can use the phone to be connected to JBC's room. It rings 3 times and he picks up. JBC, hello. Me, JBC, can you send my wife down to the lobby please? JBC, I don't know what you're talking about bro. Me, okay then. I guess I'll have to call Mrs. JBC and get her down here. Totally a bluff. I knew he was married and I knew her first name, but that was it. JBC, inaudible, shuffling, panic. Me, you got 5 minutes. Click. Not even 2 minutes later my wife comes walking out of the elevator looking a little flustered. I sit her down in the corner of the lobby. Starts spewing bullshit saying it's not what it seems etc etc. Me, I'm not here to argue. The things that are said in this pile of papers are what's going on. The only way I'm not giving a copy of this to daughter, your parents and emailing it to everyone we know is if you move out immediately. Wife was very prideful. Daughter was going through a rebellious teen phase and her knowing probably would have forever killed their relationship. Wife was also her parents' golden child and she always worried about what they thought of her. I didn't have much leverage and shame was my only card to play. Also her professional life is built up around her image, so I knew she would protect that at all costs. Sniffle, mumble, inaudible. Me, this is a check for half of the money market account. I've withdrawn my half of the money from all the other joint accounts. You should have more than enough to get a place. She starts to cry a little. I could almost see the different thoughts and waves of emotions going through her, but now was the time to keep pressing. Me, here is a separation agreement that I think is more than fair considering what's going on. I'm going to need you to look this over, sign it, and leave it at the house when you get your stuff. Do you want to look through these screenshots? No. Me, okay. Go have fun with JBC. Do not come back to the house, or I'm going to send this, holds up ream of screenshots, to everyone. I bounce out of the lobby, and I can hear her start to have a breakdown. I get to the car, drive off to a parking lot, and have my own crying rage fit. Previously I would have cried in front of her, and yelled and whatnot, but I managed to get my shit together enough to pull it off. I don't know what she did that night, or over the weekend. She texted and called over and over wanting to talk. I just turned the phone off, and by the time Monday afternoon rolled around there were movers getting her stuff and she delivered the agreement. I'll let her have a talk with the kiddos, basically saying mommy and daddy need some time apart, we still love you, etc etc. Standard divorce talk. After a week she wants to have a real talk for the first time. I oblige her, because I've already got my shit together, and I've got an idea of what I want, but I should hear her out. She's so sorry. She wants another chance. She wants her family back. She'll do anything. She's on her knees crying into my lap. I have no intention of ever taking her back. I tell her she needs to set up marriage counseling on her own at a time that works for me. I tell her that I can't live with her, but she should be around the children to try to maintain a relationship with them. So starts a new normal of her coming over the house, cooking and having dinner with the kids 3 nights a week. She always saved me a plate. I made myself scarce, her cleaning the house and doing the kids' laundry, then heading back to her place. We went to counseling. It consisted of her working through her issues with the therapist, trying to figure out why she did it, her begging for forgiveness, and me stoically playing the victim. I was never going to give her another chance. All I wanted to do was kill time, establish myself as the primary caregiver to the kids, and establish her as not having residency in the house. After a few months I go to my own therapist and get diagnosed with depression and PTSD. I ask my work if it's possible to go to part-time for the foreseeable future to deal with personal issues, and it's no big deal. After 6 months of therapy I told her that I couldn't forgive her right now, and that I wanted an amicable divorce, but she is still the love of my life and maybe someday we could give it another try. She was devastated, but agreed to the divorce if I promised to try again someday. Once the divorce was filed I needed the kids to want to stay with me. I left a Google search for how to survive your wife's infidelity up on the shared PC at home, and I left some printed out infidelity articles not so hidden in the kitchen. My daughter found them and came to me crying. I told her she wasn't supposed to find those, that mom made a mistake, that mom still loves her, and that I would always be here for her. My daughter, who used to hold my wife in such high regard, now wouldn't talk to her without screaming, and it crushed her. Not surprisingly, when the court needed statements from the kids a few months later, little brother followed big sister's lead, and they both wanted to stay with dad in the house they grew up in. When the divorce was finalized I got the house. Had to buy out some of her equity, but that's okay. I got primary custody of the kids. I got awarded generous child support due to the difference in our incomes due to me working part-time. Now for the last 2 years I've gotten to live in the house with my kids, work part-time, get the now ex to subsidize it for me, and when she takes the kids over the weekends I get to have my fun with Tindereddit and some FWBs I've cultivated. In the eyes of my kids I'm the patron saint of fatherhood for taking the high road and always being there. In the eyes of my ex I'm the one that got away, that she will always pine for, and I get the bonus of having her come over for 6 whenever I want it, by dangling that